Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Got another exciting career path to explore with everyone today, getting you prepped for an HVACR Engineering Technician interview.
Yeah, using these guides you provided, really going to unpack this and get into it.
Absolutely.
Oh,
We've got the career guide and the interview guide, so we're really going to take a deep dive, not just into the interview questions, but really understanding what this career is all about.
yeah, absolutely. And what's so interesting about this one, we see these interview guides all the time, but this is a field that's it's more than just like fixing your air conditioner.
Right.
Like this career guide talks about designing systems, talking about meeting environmental standards, even handling hazardous materials.
Okay, so there's some serious responsibility here.
Yeah.
So before we even jump into like the questions about like tell me about yourself and all that, like how can someone, especially if they have limited experience, really talk about what an HVACR engineering technician does in a way that's going to resonate with someone who's interviewing them?
Well, I think that's a really good point to start with because you don't want to go into an interview and sound like you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, especially when they're looking for somebody with experience. But you need to demonstrate that you've done your homework even if you haven't been in the field for decades. And, this guide mentions smart thermostats, natural refrigerants. Those are industry trends. That's a great place to start, even if you haven't installed them, professionally, showing that you understand how these things impact an HVACR technician's daily work can really set you apart from somebody else who maybe hasn't done their homework.
So even just like tinkering with your smart thermostat at home
Exactly.
could be a valuable thing to mention.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it shows that you understand that the field is moving in a more efficient, environmentally friendly direction, and you're not just stuck in like the old ways of doing things.
Right, you're ready to adapt.
Exactly.
So speaking of adapting, let's adapt to the interview guide. It's like we get to like be in the interviewer's mind a little bit here because they gave us a sneak peek.
Okay.
What experience do you have working with HVAC and refrigeration systems? Like, that's such a classic question.
Yeah, it is a classic. And I think this is also where RoleCatcher can really come in handy because they have that AI that can look at your background and kind of suggest experiences that you might not even think are relevant. So you might be thinking, well, I've never been like, an HVACR technician, but I was a bike mechanic. Well, that might not seem relevant on the surface, but there are a lot of transferable skills there. So you can talk about how you were troubleshooting complex mechanical systems and then tie that directly to how that's going to translate into the HVACR world.
Yeah, so it's almost like instead of saying I fixed bikes, it's my experience in troubleshooting these complex mechanical systems has given me a strong foundation in diagnosing and repairing.
Right.
And then you can tie it directly into HVACR.
Exactly. And what RoleCatcher can do is really help you tailor that language to the specific job descriptions. So it's not just a generic answer that you're giving to every single interview. You can really make sure that it's going to resonate with that specific employer.
Right. Now let's say they're like, okay, so you've done some tinkering, but how do you actually troubleshoot an HVAC and refrigeration systems?
Yeah.
Like they want to know your process.
Right.
They're really getting into it now.
Exactly. Yeah. They want to know that you have a system, that you're not just randomly turning knobs and hoping for the best. And this is where, again, the guide is really helpful because they talk about, checking the thermostat settings, inspecting air filters, examining the condenser unit. But instead of just listing those things off, what you want to do is talk about a specific time when you've done this, even if it was on your own AC unit at home.
So instead of just, I would check the thermostat, it's like, well, this one time my AC unit wasn't working, and the first thing I did was check the thermostat.
Exactly. Something as simple as that makes your answer way more relatable, way more memorable. And again, it shows that you understand the process, even if you haven't been doing it professionally for years and years.
Right. So it's like taking what's in the textbook and then adding that real world example to it, even if it's just a small, simple one.
And this is where the AI feedback from RoleCatcher can be really, really valuable because they can analyze your response and be like, okay, that's good, but what if you add this? Like, instead of just saying, I checked the air filter, you say, I checked the air filter and it was really dirty. And by replacing the dirty air filter, I was able to improve the airflow and reduce the temperature by 5 degrees. Adding those quantifiable results can make a big difference.
So it's like having a little interview coach in your pocket.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, let's say they want to dig even deeper, which a lot of these interviewers will.
Yeah.
They want to know, like, okay, tell me about a time that you faced a really challenging problem. And maybe you're earlier in your career and you're like, I don't know if I've had that big HVACR crisis moment yet.
Right, right. Well, this is where you kind of have to get creative and think outside of the box and outside of traditional work experience. So, did you ever take apart like an appliance just to see how it works? Or maybe you helped your grandpa fix his boiler one time. You really want to focus on the skills that you displayed, even if the situation wasn't in like a professional setting.
So even fixing like a leaky faucet
Absolutely.
could be framed as relevant experience here.
Yeah, because again, it's all about problem solving. It's about your ability to diagnose issues. It's about your willingness to get your hands dirty. And those are all qualities that are going to be highly valued in the HVACR field.
Speaking of getting your hands dirty, I'm seeing hazardous materials
Yeah.
in this career guide.
Yes.
What if they start asking about that?
That's a great question because safety is so important in this field. And this is where, even if you're still pursuing it, mentioning things like the EPA Section 608 certification can be really powerful because it shows that you are serious about refrigerant handling. You're not just going to be like, oh, whatever, I'll just vent it into the atmosphere.
Right. So it's not just like safety first. It's like you're backing it up.
Exactly. You can say something like, well, I'm currently pursuing my EPA Section 608 certification. I understand the importance of handling these things safely, responsibly, and I'm eager to learn more about the specific protocols that your company follows.
Because you're aware. You're ready to learn.
Exactly.
You're taking it seriously.
And again, this is where RoleCatcher can come in and help you tailor those responses to the specific company and job requirements. So if they mention in the job description that they're really big on environmental responsibility, well, you want to mention that you're committed to proper refrigerant recovery and recycling procedures.
So do your homework. Connect those dots.
Exactly.
See how it all ties together.
Exactly. It really is. You got to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Okay, makes sense. Now, what about... The guide also mentions questions about like staying up to date with technology. What if, someone doesn't have 20 years of experience to talk about all the new things that have happened?
Right. Well, this is where I think, you really want to express your natural curiosity. So, you can mention, oh, I've been reading a lot about, the challenges of transitioning to R32 refrigerant, or I'm part of this online forum where HVACR technicians are talking about the latest technology. Even if it's something small like that, it shows that you're actively engaged.
But you're invested in learning and growing. Yeah.
Exactly. Even if you haven't had the opportunity to work with it professionally yet. And again, this is where RoleCatcher can come in handy because they can tell you, based on the job description, what are the skills that you really want to be highlighting. So, if this company specializes in geothermal systems, well then, if you've done any research on that or if you have any interest in that area, that's definitely something you're going to want to bring up.
So connect those dots.
Yeah.
Present yourself as a valuable asset, even if you're still gaining that experience.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of experience,
Yeah.
I feel like this question always comes up.
Yeah.
How do you prioritize and manage your workload?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. And this is where, you really want to showcase your organizational skills, your ability to handle multiple tasks efficiently. And, going back to that leaky faucet example,
Yeah.
you can even use that to talk about your project management skills.
So instead of just being like, I'm organized, it's like, well, when I tackle that leaky faucet, I created a step-by-step plan. I made sure I had all the materials before I started. Exactly. I got it done efficiently.
Yeah, you're demonstrating those organizational skills that are going to be so valuable in any field, but especially HVACR, because you're often going to be juggling multiple jobs, going to different locations. You have to be organized.
You can't just be like, oh, I'll get to that when I get to it.
Right, exactly. And again, this is where RoleCatcher can help you fine-tune that answer and be like, okay, that's good, but what if you added this? Like maybe instead of just saying you completed the repair, you say, I completed the repair in under an hour, which was significantly faster than if I had called a plumber.
Yeah.
Just adding those little quantifiable results can make a big difference.
It's all in the details, right?
Yes, exactly.
Now, another one, especially since we're talking about like environmental standards
Yeah.
in the career guide, what about how do you ensure customer satisfaction? Because it's not just about like fixing the thing. It's about the people that you're,
Oh, absolutely. That's such a key part of this job that a lot of people don't think about. You're not just dealing with machines, you're dealing with people, often stressed out people because their AC's down or their heat's not working. So empathy is huge here. Mention that you understand, clear communication is really important, being respectful, especially if you're dealing with somebody who's maybe not familiar with the technical jargon.
So you're fixing the AC unit, but you're also fixing the experience, kind of.
Exactly. Exactly. Think about a time when you went above and beyond for a customer. Even if it wasn't in a professional setting, maybe you helped your elderly neighbor program their thermostat, or, you patiently explain a technical concept to a friend who just was not getting it.
So even those little acts of kindness can become like these powerful stories that you can tell in an interview.
Absolutely. It shows your empathy, it shows your communication skills, it shows that you're dedicated to providing that excellent customer service. And again, RoleCatcher can help you tailor those stories to the specific requirements of the job. So if the company prides itself on its customer service, you want to make sure that you are highlighting your own customer service philosophy and how it aligns with their values.
Love it. Connect those dots. Now here's one. How do you handle difficult or challenging situations on the job? I feel like there's got to be some stories in there.
Oh, yeah. Every job has its challenges, right? And this is where you really get to showcase your resilience, your problem-solving skills.
Ugh.
And it's not about pretending like you've never had a difficult situation. It's about how you overcame those challenges and what you learned from them. So, think about a time when, maybe a project went sideways or you had to adapt to unexpected circumstances.
So even if I haven't had like the major HVACR crisis,
Yeah.
you're saying I can still use those like universal experiences of like dealing with pressure and having to like figure things out on the fly.
Exactly. Because what the interviewer wants to see is that you can think on your feet, that you can maintain your composure under pressure, and that you can find solutions when things don't go according to plan. Because let's face it, in the HVACR world, things are not always going to go according to plan.
Right. Murphy's Law of HVAC.
Exactly.
And I'm imagining RoleCatcher can help me even like structure my response to like make sure I'm hitting those key things
Yeah.
that are going to really stand out to the interviewer.
Absolutely. The AI can analyze your story and say, okay, you might want to use the STAR method here, which is, situation, task, action, result. It's a very common way of structuring your answer to this type of question. And it really helps to make sure that you're telling the story in a way that's clear, concise, and really highlights those problem-solving skills.
Because sometimes it's not enough to just have the story. You have to know how to tell it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Now, what about, we've been talking about some of these like, individual things, but HVACR, you're working with a team a lot. What about those questions about how do you work with a team to get a project done?
Yes. And this is another really big one because, again, a lot of HVACR projects, you're not going to be working in isolation. You're going to be working with other tradespeople, electricians, plumbers, building contractors, all these different people. So you have to be able to play nice in the sandbox.
Right. So teamwork is essential.
Exactly.
And interviewers are always going to ask about that.
Yeah.
So what are some like good examples of like teamwork things that, people could use?
Right.
Because we don't want to just be like, I'm a team player.
Right, exactly. You have to show, not tell. So think back to, maybe those team projects you did in school or volunteer experiences where you had to work together to achieve a common goal.
Even playing on a sports team.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any situation where you had to communicate effectively, delegate tasks, support your team members, those are all going to be relevant here.
So instead of just saying like, I'm a team player or I work well with others, it's like, describe a time that you did that.
Exactly. Give a concrete example. It's going to make your answer way more relatable, way more believable.
And I'm sure RoleCatcher has some ideas in their little, AI brain about how to like, what things I should highlight about my teamwork experience.
Well, absolutely. They can look at the job description and say, okay, this particular role really emphasizes communication skills. So you're going to want to make sure you talk about how you effectively communicate with your teammates, how you resolve conflicts, how you make sure that everyone's on the same page.
It's all about showcasing those things that are going to be the most valuable to that particular opportunity.
Exactly.
Now, let's get into some of these like really technical questions.
Okay.
Like, could you explain the difference between a heat pump and a furnace? Like that's
classic.
Yeah, that's like HVAC 101.
Huh.
But it's still something that, you have to be able to articulate in a way that makes sense, maybe to someone who is not an HVAC expert.
Exactly. And I always tell people, imagine you're explaining it to your grandma,
Yeah.
Like, how would you break it down for somebody who has absolutely no background in this field?
So for heat pumps, I might be like, imagine it's a two-way street. In the winter, it brings the heat from outside to inside. And then in the summer, it reverses and takes the heat from inside to out.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It's simple, it's relatable, and it gets the point across.
And then for a furnace, it's kind of like the old school.
Yeah.
It's making the heat, right?
Exactly. It's like a fireplace. essentially, you
Yeah.
know? It's burning fuel to generate heat, and then that heat is circulated throughout your home.
And I'm sure RoleCatcher can tell me if my analogies are good or not, or if there's like a better way to.
Oh, absolutely. The AI can analyze your language and be like, you know what? That's a good analogy, but maybe this one would resonate better with the interviewer. Or, maybe you could explain it this way.
So it's like having a little
A
thesaurus.
lithosaurus for your answers.
I love that. Okay, what about this? This is getting a little deeper. Can you describe the refrigeration cycle and its four main components?
Okay, so this one's really getting into the nitty-gritty of how refrigeration systems work.
Right, so it's not just knowing the four parts, it's.
Exactly. You have to understand how they interact. You have to understand the role that each component plays in the overall cycle.
Right. So what I always think of is it's a loop.
Okay.
Right. And essentially, the refrigerant is going through these four different stages or these four different components, and it's changing, and then it's doing its job, and then it's going back around.
Okay, so let's break that down. What are those four components?
So first, you have the compressor, which I always think of it's like the heart of the system. It's pumping the refrigerant through. It's increasing that pressure.
Okay. Good analogy. What's next?
Then it goes into the condenser. So now that high-pressure refrigerant goes into the condenser where it's going to release the heat, and it goes from a gas to a liquid. Then it goes to the expansion valve, which is going to cause a pressure drop, and it's going to get nice and cold, essentially.
Okay. And then finally,
It goes to the evaporator, which is where it's going to pull the heat from, like the air or the water that's going through. And then that's what's going to get circulated, right? It's going to cool it down, and then that refrigerant's going to go back to the compressor and do it all over again.
perfect. That was a fantastic explanation. You clearly understand the refrigeration cycle and its four main components.
And again, I'm hoping RoleCatcher can tell me if I missed anything or if I said anything not quite right or.
Absolutely. The AI can analyze your response and say, okay, you might want to rephrase this, or you might want to use a different example. It's all about making sure that you are conveying the information in the clearest, most concise way possible.
Perfect. Now, this one's a big one, especially with everything changing so fast. How do you stay up to date with the latest advancements and technologies in HVACR?
Yeah, because this field is constantly evolving. There are new technologies, new regulations, new best practices emerging all the time.
So it's not just like you go to trade school and then you're done. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Continuous learning is essential.
Yeah, you got to be a lifelong learner.
Yes.
So how can someone do that? I mean, what are like some ways?
Well, attending industry conferences and trade shows is a great way to do it because you get to, network with other professionals, you see new products firsthand, you can attend seminars, workshops.
You're in the know. Yeah.
Exactly. Another great way is to pursue continuing education courses, certifications. A lot of trade schools, community colleges, professional organizations, they offer specialized courses on things like smart home integration, geothermal systems, variable refrigerant flow, VRF
So
systems.
you're saying like those certifications, it's not just a piece of paper. It's like.
Exactly. It shows that you are committed to professional development.
Right. And if an employer sees that, they're going to be like, okay, this person's invested.
Exactly.
They're not going to just like, rest on their laurels of what they learned, however many years ago.
And then, of course, staying up to date on industry publications, online resources, professional forums. There's so much information available at our fingertips these days.
Right. You can just like Google it.
Exactly.
All right. Now, what about this question? Can you describe a time when you had to deal with a difficult customer and how you handled the situation?
Ooh, yeah. The dreaded difficult customer question. This one comes up in a lot of interviews, but it's especially relevant in a field like HVACR where you're interacting with the public. People are often stressed out, like we were saying.
So it's going to happen.
It's bound to happen, and the interviewer knows that. They're not trying to trick you with this question. They really just want to see, how do you handle conflict? How do you maintain your composure under pressure? And most importantly, how do you ensure customer satisfaction even when it's really, really hard?
So how do you answer that? Because it's like, you don't want to throw anyone under the bus.
Right.
You don't want to name names.
Exactly. And you definitely don't want to badmouth previous customers. That's a huge red flag. The key here is to focus on the steps that you took to de-escalate the situation, how you address the customer's concerns, and ultimately, how you found a solution that worked for everyone involved. So for example, you could say something like, I once had a customer who was incredibly frustrated because their AC unit wasn't cooling properly during a heat wave. I mean, talk about a stressful situation, right? Their house is hot, they're uncomfortable, they're probably worried about the cost of repairs.
Yeah.
So, you know, you acknowledge that. You say, I understand that this is a really frustrating situation for you. Let's see what we can do to get this fixed as quickly as possible. Just showing that empathy can go a long way. And then you walk them through the steps that you took to diagnose and repair the issue. And throughout the whole process, you remain calm, you remain patient, you remain professional.
And you get the job done.
Yeah.
But even if you don't have, like, you're not able to magically fix it on the spot, it's about how you manage those expectations and that communication.
Exactly. Exactly. Because sometimes, it's not a quick fix. It's going to require ordering parts or, bringing in additional help. And that's okay. As long as you're keeping the customer informed every step of the way and you're being transparent about, what the timeline looks like, what the costs are going to be, that's what really matters.
Communication is key.
Always.
Okay. So now they want to know, how do you ensure compliance with industry regulations and safety standards?
This is a big one, too, because as we talked about earlier, safety is paramount in this field. And the interviewer wants to know that you're not just going to be cutting corners or, putting yourself or others in danger. So this is where you really want to talk about your commitment to following the rules. You could say something like, I make it a priority to stay up to date on the latest industry regulations and safety standards. And then you could give some specific examples of how you do that. Like, I attend training courses, I read industry publications, I consult with more experienced technicians, things like that.
And we're not just talking about like OSHA, although that's obvious.
Oh, absolutely. OSHA's a big one.
A big one. But like, all those little details. We're talking about handling refrigerants.
Yes. Yes, exactly. You want to mention that you're following the EPA's regulations for, safe handling, storage, disposal of refrigerants, because those are things that, if you're not doing them properly, it can have serious consequences, not just for the environment, but for people's health as well.
For sure. Yeah. So you really want to like reassure that interviewer that like, I take this seriously.
Yes, absolutely. This is not a joke. This is serious business.
Right. Okay. Now, here's another one where we can tell some stories. Can you describe a time when you had to troubleshoot a complex technical problem?
Oh, yeah, this is a fun one. Because this is your chance to really show off your problem-solving skills, your technical expertise. And again, it's not just about, like, being able to fix things. It's about how you approach the problem. How do you think critically? How do you analyze the situation?
So you're like an HVACR detective. Kind of.
Exactly. You're like Sherlock Holmes of HVAC. You're gathering clues, you're eliminating possibilities, and then ultimately you crack the case and you fix the problem.
I love that. Okay, so how do I set the stage for a story like that?
Well, think back to a time when you faced a particularly challenging technical issue. Maybe it was a system that was behaving erratically. Maybe a component kept failing, but you couldn't figure out why. Or a problem that had multiple potential causes and you had to really, dig deep to figure out what was going on. The key here is to choose an example that showcases your ability to really think critically, to diagnose the problem effectively, and then, of course, to implement a successful solution.
So, I wouldn't want to use the example of oh, I just had to, replace the air filter and then it was fine.
Right. Exactly. That's not really a complex problem. That's something that hopefully most people in this field would be able to figure out pretty easily. You want to choose something that's a little bit more challenging, a little bit more thought-provoking.
Got it. So what if I said something like, I was working on this commercial refrigeration unit and it was having intermittent cooling problems. It would work fine for a few hours.
Yeah.
And then it would just stop cooling. And then it would start working again and we couldn't figure out why.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one. That's a real head-scratcher. So what did you do?
So, I started by checking all the usual suspects. I checked the thermostat settings, I checked the refrigerant levels, I looked for leaks. I inspected the compressor and condenser unit for any signs of damage or malfunction. But everything seemed to be in working order.
So you eliminated the obvious stuff.
Exactly. So then I decided to monitor the system really closely for a few days. Put in some temperature and pressure gauges at various points in the system just to collect some data and see if I could identify any patterns in the system's behavior. And what I noticed was that the cooling problem, it always seemed to occur when the ambient temperature outside would reach a certain threshold.
Interesting. So it was like clockwork almost.
Almost. Once it hit a certain temperature outside, boom, the system would act up.
So what did you do with that information?
Well, that's when I started to suspect that the problem might be related to the high-pressure cutoff switch. That switch is designed to shut down the compressor if the pressure in the system gets too high, which can happen when it's really hot outside.
Right. It's a safety feature.
Exactly. It's
Sure.
supposed to prevent damage to the compressor. But I was thinking maybe the switch itself is faulty, or maybe there's a problem with the wiring. So to test my theory, I carefully bypassed the high-pressure cutoff switch, and I kept a close eye on the system.
And
And just as I suspected, the cooling problem disappeared.
so it was the switch all along.
It was the switch.
Right.
So I replaced the faulty switch with a new one, and I made sure it was wired correctly and everything. And then we ran the system through a series of tests, and everything checked out. The cooling problem was gone.
That's fantastic. You were like a detective, like we were saying. You used your knowledge, your problem-solving skills, and you fixed the problem.
Exactly.
That's a great story to tell in an interview.
And again, I'm imagining RoleCatcher could help me structure that story, add those little details to really make it shine.
Absolutely. They can help you highlight those key moments, those moments where you really showcase your expertise. Because sometimes it's not just about what you know, it's about how you communicate it.
Right. It's about telling the story in a way that's engaging and memorable.
Mm.
Okay, let's talk more about teamwork. A lot of HVACR projects involve working with other tradespeople, like electricians, plumbers, building contractors. So teamwork is essential. What are some common interview questions about teamwork, and how should we approach them?
Well, a really common one is, can you describe a time when you had to work as part of a team to complete a project? And this one's pretty straightforward. They just want to know that you have experience working collaboratively and that you understand the importance of teamwork in achieving shared goals. So think about a time when you worked on a project that required input and effort from multiple people. Maybe you're part of a team that installed a new HVAC system in a large commercial building.
Okay, so what would that story sound like?
Well, you could say something like, we had this project where we had to install a brand new HVAC system in this huge office building. And it wasn't just about like installing the units themselves. We had to work closely with the electricians to make sure the electrical was all up to code. We had to coordinate with the plumbers to make sure the condensate drainage was set up correctly. And of course, we had to keep the general contractor updated on our progress so he could keep the project on schedule.
So it's really about highlighting those moments where you had to communicate effectively, delegate tasks, and just generally be a team player.
Exactly, exactly. Because, in a situation like that, it's not just about doing your own job and then clocking out. You have to be willing to help out your teammates, offer support where needed, and be flexible when things inevitably change.
Right, because no plan survives first contact with the enemy.
Right. Exactly. That's so true in construction. You have to be able to adapt and overcome. Now, another common teamwork question is, how do you handle disagreements of conflicts within a team?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Because let's face it, conflict is inevitable in any workplace, and HVACR is no exception. So how do you show the interviewer that you're able to handle those situations maturely and professionally?
Well, the key here is to demonstrate that you can approach disagreements constructively and that you're able to find mutually acceptable solutions. So instead of getting defensive or placing blame, try to focus on how you listen to the other person's perspective, how you communicate your own viewpoint respectfully, and how you work collaboratively to find a solution that addresses everyone's concerns.
Okay, so what would that sound like in an actual interview? Could you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say, for instance, you had a disagreement with a teammate about the best way to install a duct system. You could say something like, my teammate and I, we had slightly different ideas about how to approach this duct installation. I was thinking we should use this particular method, but he was convinced that his way would be more efficient. So instead of just arguing about it, we decided to take a step back and really listen to each other's perspectives. We talked through the pros and cons of each method, and in the end, we were actually able to come up with a hybrid approach that incorporated the best of both of our ideas.
That's awesome. So it's really about turning that potential conflict into an opportunity for collaboration and innovation.
Exactly, exactly. And it shows the interviewer that you're not afraid of a little bit of healthy debate, but you're also able to put your ego aside and prioritize what's best for the team and the project as a whole. Now, another teamwork-related question that often comes up is, what role do you typically play within a team?
Oh, interesting. So they're trying to figure out your work style and how you contribute to a team dynamic.
Exactly. And there's no right or wrong answer here. Some people are natural leaders, while others are more comfortable taking on a supporting role. The important thing is to be honest about your strengths and weaknesses. So, for example, you could say, I am a very organized and detail-oriented person, so I often find myself gravitating towards the role of project manager or taskmaster, making sure that things stay on track and deadlines are met. But I'm also a very collaborative person, so I'm always happy to offer my help and support to my teammates, even if it means taking on tasks outside of my defined role.
That's great. So you're highlighting your strengths while also demonstrating that you're a team player who's willing to go the extra mile.
Exactly. And it's also okay to acknowledge areas where you're still developing. For example, you could say something like, while I'm comfortable leading projects, I'm always looking for opportunities to improve my leadership skills. I'm a firm believer in lifelong learning, so I'm always eager to learn from more experienced team members and take on new challenges that will help me grow both professionally and personally.
I love that. It shows that you're self-aware, that you're ambitious, and that you're committed to continuous improvement. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about certifications. These are essential in the HVACR industry, and interviewers often ask about them to gauge your level of expertise and your dedication to the field.
Absolutely. Certifications are a big deal in this industry. They demonstrate that you have the knowledge and skills necessary to perform your job safely and effectively.
So what are some common certification-related questions that might come up in an interview, and how should we approach them?
Well, a really common one is, what HVACR certifications do you currently hold? And this one's pretty straightforward. Just be prepared to list all of the relevant certifications you hold, including the certifying organization and the date you earned each certification.
Okay. And is it enough to just list them, or should I provide some context as well?
It's always a good idea to provide a little bit of context just so the interviewer understands the scope of each certification and the skills that it demonstrates. So, for example, you could say, I hold the EPA Section 608 certification, which qualifies me to safely handle refrigerants. I also have my NATE certification in air conditioning installation and service. Just a brief explanation of what each certification entails.
That makes sense. Now, what if I'm currently pursuing a certification but haven't actually earned it yet? Should I mention that in an interview?
Absolutely. In fact, I encourage you to mention any certifications that you're actively pursuing. It shows the interviewer that you're committed to continuous learning and professional development, which is a huge plus in this industry. You could say something like, I'm currently studying for my NITE certification in heat pump installation and service, and I plan to take the exam within the next few months.
I love that. It shows initiative and a desire to expand your knowledge and skill set.
Exactly. And it also shows that you're willing to invest in yourself and your career, which is something that employers really value.
Now, another common certification-related question is, how have your certifications benefited your career?
This one's a great opportunity to really showcase how those certifications have enhanced your skills, opened doors to new opportunities, or even increased your earning potential.
So it's not just about checking a box on your resume. It's about the real tangible benefits that those certifications have brought to your career.
Exactly. And again, be specific. Use concrete examples. You could say something like, earning my NATE certification in air conditioning installation and service allowed me to take on more challenging projects, which ultimately led to a 10% increase in my hourly rate. It's also given me more credibility with customers who know that I've been certified by a reputable organization.
Those are fantastic examples. They really demonstrate the value of pursuing certifications in the HVACR field. Okay, so we're nearing the end of the interview, and the interviewer asks, do you have any questions for me? This is your chance to turn the tables a little bit and become the interviewer. It's an opportunity for you to gather more information about the company, the team, the role, and to demonstrate your genuine interest and enthusiasm.
Yes, this is such a crucial part of the interview, and so many candidates miss the mark here. They either don't ask any questions at all, which makes them seem uninterested, or they ask questions that could have easily been answered with a quick Google search.
So what are some good questions that candidates can ask to really impress the interviewer?
Well, one that I always recommend is, can you tell me more about the company's culture and values? This shows that you're not just looking for any job, you're looking for the right cultural fit. You want to work somewhere where you feel, valued, appreciated, where your contributions are recognized, where you feel like you're part of a team.
Absolutely. You want more than just a paycheck. You're looking for a place where you can thrive.
Exactly. Another good question is, what opportunities for professional development and advancement are there within the company? Are there opportunities to learn new skills, take on more responsibility, maybe even move up into a management position someday?
It shows you're thinking long term. You're not just looking for a stepping stone.
Right. Those are both great questions that focus on the bigger picture, but don't forget to ask about the specifics of the role itself, too.
Right. So you could ask things like, can you describe a typical day in this role? Or what are some of the biggest challenges and rewards of this position?
Exactly. You want to get a feel for what the day-to-day realities of the job are really like. And don't be afraid to ask about the team you'll be working with either.
Yeah, you could ask something like, can you tell me more about the team I'd be joining and the company's management style?
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, you're not just joining a company, you're joining a team.
Those are all fantastic questions that could really help you gather some valuable information and make a more informed decision about whether or not this is the right opportunity for you. Remember, the interview process is a two-way street.
Exactly.
It's not just about them evaluating you. It's about you evaluating them as well.
100%. And speaking of having a leg up in the interview process, can we talk about RoleCatcher for a minute?
Yes. Let's talk about RoleCatcher, because we've been sprinkling it in throughout our deep dive today. But I want to really emphasize how much this tool can help you stand out from the competition.
Seriously. Their AI-powered features are a game changer. It's like having a personal career coach and a resume guru all rolled into one.
Right. From crafting that perfect resume to practicing your answers to those tough interview questions, RoleCatcher has got you covered.
And don't even get me started on their library of interview questions and answers. Seriously, it's a lifesaver.
It's like having a secret weapon in your back pocket. It's that extra boost of confidence knowing you're prepared for anything they throw at you.
Could have said it better myself. RoleCatcher is the real deal, folks. If you're serious about landing that dream job in the HVACR field, this tool is your new best friend.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of HVACR engineering technicians. We covered a lot of ground today, from deciphering the job description to mastering those interview questions. And we can't forget about the power of RoleCatcher to give you that extra edge.
Absolutely. Remember, preparation is key.
You've got this. Go out there and ace those interviews.
Good luck.